So good afternoon. Should we all do some brain gym? Do you do anybody sleeping? No? You're awake? Do we have to do brain gym? Stand, stretch? No? Not needed? Okay. So my presentation this afternoon is called More Than Inclusion, Valuing the Contribution of people with developmental disabilities or special needs or differently abled persons. Are there any persons with special needs in the room here today? Children? Adults? No? Okay. So that says something, right? Where are they? Where do you think they are? You are here and I am here, but where are our friends with special needs? Where do you think they would be? Any ideas? Do you have friends? Okay, where are they? Tell me. Okay. Do you have friends with special needs? No? Okay. So maybe they are at home. Maybe they are in a day program. Maybe they are in a segregated school setting. Do you know what a segregated school setting is? That they are learning separately on their own. Okay? So from this we can know that the history of the life, a way of life for persons with special needs is characterized by invisibility. In some case it is discrimination. In some case it is abuse. So it hasn't been very happy for them. It has been quite tragic. So we want to look at how we can make them a part of our lives, how we can bring them in and enjoy the gifts that they have to give as well. So excuse me, could I just carry on, please? So the first little picture there that you can see shows a little bit of the history where somebody is hidden. You don't see them. They are not a part of their lives. We've brought them in. The next picture shows some happiness because they've been brought out of their segregated settings. And the last picture shows some sign of togetherness. Maybe they are together. So what I want to suggest here is when we say more than inclusion, we want to look at the term inclusion itself and why it is problematic. Because when we have the term inclusion, it implies that some are in and some are out. So we want to move beyond that. And when we move beyond that, what can we suggest? We can say that we want a sense of belonging. So do you enjoy a sense of belonging to your families or in your class? Do you enjoy saying, this is my family, this is where I belong? Yes? Yes, so they enjoy that as well. So to go for an overview to my presentation here, we look at social justice to mean more than inclusion, and that is belonging. We look at disability and schooling, and I'll be talking about two specific cases. We look at the changing framework of disability or what has happened over the last few years, and I'll try to keep that somewhat meaningful and relevant to you. Then we talk about the need of protection and what this does for ourselves and society, how useful it is, what are the pros and cons of saying we need protection. Then we look at empathy as innovation or compassion, and when you really love somebody or something, how that can become a platform for being creative. Then I show you the work of some artists and those who have used their compassion and creativity to create something beautiful, the theme of belonging, and I conclude with a quote. So here I bring up two case studies. This is my friend Sarah. I worked with Sarah. She's a little girl of 9. She was 20 years ago, a little girl with Down syndrome. And I want to tell you a story about her. My work with her included using different kinds of computers and technology for her language and literacy development. So we had 1.5 hours when we would work with her in a lab. And in between that time, we would go and have a snack. This was in Canada. So we would have maybe coffee and a muffin for a snack. And one particular day when we went for a snack, Sarah asked me if I had any children. And I was single at the time. I didn't have any children. And I said, no, I don't have any children. And then she said, do you have a husband? I found it interesting that she asked me whether I had children and then a husband. Anyway, I said, no, I don't have a husband. And then she said, you should marry an electrician. And I said, why? And of course she said, because he will light up your life. And it is not something that, I expected from her. It was a very sweet kind of a response. And so I found that she had led me along, even though she was labeled as having Down syndrome, and even though her IQ was pegged at moderate level, she was able to lead me along in a way with a metaphor in mind. And so we worked together and she performed very well. She learned to use the technology and she became an advocate for herself. And she also became an EA in the school where she would help the teacher to teach other children to use technology for their language and literacy development. And there was another day when you will see as we go along, I told her when I sat down, Sarah, my agenda for you today is a little bit of reading, a little bit of keyboard time and some writing. And just like that I said, do you have an agenda? Because I wanted to see if she had anything in mind. And she said to me, I would like to go to a conference. And I got surprised because it's not what I expected again. And I said, what kind of a conference? And she said, I want to go for a conference where we talk about work and where we will go when we finish school. So here is a kid with Down syndrome who is thinking about her future and transitioning and wanting to know where she can get information about going to work when she has finished school. So we looked online and actually there was no conference. So we said we will make our own conference. And so we sat down and we made a plan for our own conference, and she picked out who she would invite, and she also said that she would be the keynote speaker, one of the keynote speakers, and she decided that she would like to have apples and muffins as snacks, and that the registration fee for the conference would be $7. All of this came from a 9-year-old kid who we label and sometimes say they don't have the competency to be in 9th standard would be what grade, 4 or 5, and they don't have the competency. But she does once she's given that freedom, and once she's given that education, and once she's given the environment in which she can flourish, she can very well do so. Now we have Ria on the other side, who was another young girl with Rett syndrome. And in this particular case, sadly, she was assessed in her school, and because she couldn't perform certain tasks, she was labeled as incompetent and said that she cannot be in school because she cannot do certain tasks. And one of the tasks required was to ring a bell that was on the table. But this little girl, what she did, she started shaking the table very vigorously, and nobody recognized that except her mother. She later said, "My daughter was labeled as incompetent, but when I saw her shaking the table, I knew that she was shaking the table so that the bell would shake and she would perform the task in her own capacity." So the mother figured out that this girl not only understood her task or what she had to do, but she found a way of circumventing the problem and bridging that gap and performing the task, and nobody but her mother recognized that. So that was very sad. So Ria stayed invisible, and Ria, we don't know what happened in her school, we don't know what happened in her life, but from Sarah's point of view, we know that she was successful. She was an advocate for herself, her mother was an advocate for her, and she moved on in life. She completed her studies, she did work in a bakery, she had a boyfriend, she got married, and she went to Sunday school, and she did her traveling as well. So here is a picture of Sarah and her mother working at the lab where I worked, and here she is doing the keyboarding, and this is the program she used. It's called WordQ. It was a word prediction program, and she was very good at typing the first, you know what a word prediction program is, right? I don't need to explain that. You type the first few words of the word you want, and the word pops up and you can pick it out. So she was able to do her writing using WordQ very well. And this was the conference. It was going to be on July 14th, 2025, with apples and muffins as snacks, and she was going to discuss this and have herself as a keynote speaker. So we didn't really roll out the whole conference, but at least she had the idea and she knew what direction she wanted to take. So here what we can see from the stories of Sarah and Ria is the changing framework of disability. In some situations, atrocities happen, and in others, some really beautiful things happen. It's all at the same time in the same world. And one of the things we need to resolve is the fit of a person. Where do they fit? How do they belong? And who has the control over this? We do. We have to think together to say it is the question, the answer to this question lies in humanity and in how we become better human beings. Because as Uma ma'am was saying in her talk, we observe, we understand, and we know the needs of others. This kind of approach is very important in our field as well, because unless we can sense and understand the needs of others, we won't be able to respond to them in any good, concrete way. So one of the questions that can be asked is, whose disability is it anyway? Is it the person's disability, or is it the disability of society? So in the broader context, you have the individual pathology model where the person is found defective, and you have the social pathology model where society is found defective. Why? Because society doesn't have the capacity to absorb and have this person in their midst. They don't have the willingness, or they don't have the capacity to include people, and so society is in some way disabled. These are important questions for us to ask ourselves, and so we can emerge. So when I ask you, when we have disability, where do you feel the problem is? Is it with the person, or is it with society? Society, because society can be creative, yeah, about including people and not putting a devalued difference on disability. So disability in the West, to some extent, has moved from being a devalued difference to a cultural difference. And so people are able to have rights and have homes and have relationships and live lives like yours and mine. So here, this may be a little heavy for you, but I'll go through it a little quickly anyway. The dilemma here, and this person I like reading, he's very good in this particular area, is Dr. John McKnight. He talks about protection. And so sometimes we see in our school, like there's nobody here, right? So why is there nobody here? It could be that the need for protection is what drives special needs in the school. That's what I would like to present to you. So in one way, we want to protect and we want to be protected. And in this need to protect, what has happened is people with special needs have been put away. So others want to keep themselves safe, and so in that need for protection, we cause segregation, we cause isolation. And what happens? The person with special needs is isolated, and we are also isolated as well. But if we break down this barrier and say, instead of letting protection be something where you are kept away from me and I am kept away from you, what if we want it to be a web of coming together, a web of interdependence, a web where your gifts are recognized and my gifts are recognized. So if I am good at reading, let me read. If I have some money, let me put some money forward for this project. If I know how to celebrate life, then let me come forward and celebrate life. So we want to this particular kind of approach where protection is not there for segregation, but rather for coming together and celebrating. Does that make sense to you? Yeah. So most importantly, the stories show that greatest protection is a web of relationship and community and not a special life of segregation. And then we see that care is the only thing a system cannot produce. Every institutional effort to replace the real thing is counterfeit. So this person, John McKnight, is a little hard to read for professionals, doctors and special educators, because he takes a very hard hit at how professionalism separates the vulnerable and does not allow the vulnerable to access the needs they have, because there is this big barrier called professionalism and the white coat that people wear and the distance that has to be maintained. So files have to be kept, and when a special educator comes into the room, they may say, give me the file. Give me the file. They don't really worry about the person who is there and getting to know them. They just want to see the file. Okay, what is the label? Okay, what are the fine motor skills? Okay, what are the gross motor skills? What is the reading level? And this is how. And when they go and sit before that student, they sit like that to look. I mean, this is taking the person out of the special educator, but in many cases that's what happens. So we want educators and counselors to be there so that they can see the person. You can see their smile, you can see their jokes, you can see their humor, you can see their sadness, and you can relate to them. It's not to say we don't need files, it is rather to say that we need both. So here I want to stress on the point of empathy and caring. So these pictures are from my doctoral thesis, where the community worked with an artist. And the artist went through the community taking pictures of people who were at work and were at leisure. And she put it together in something called a celebration for life. And then she decided, as a photographer, she loved working in her dark room. So she asked each person, irrespective of whether they had disabilities or not, please bring me some objects that you really like. So some people brought keys, some people brought grass, some people, they brought all kinds of things. And she took a photograph of that and she developed it in her dark room. And now when it comes to art, and you look, can anyone tell me of these three pieces, which picture would be from a person who has disabilities and which would be from a person who doesn't? Can we tell them apart? Not really. Why? Because her mind worked so beautifully that you have a disability, but why be disabled by it? We don't have to name ourselves. We don't have to go by that. Let's get together and make something beautiful. Let's get together and have an exhibition. Let's get together and do some artwork where we can't tell who is big or who is small or who is rich or who is poor, who has abilities, who doesn't. So this is how she worked. And I feel that poets and artists, or whatever your talent, if you care enough, you can be creative enough to create these spaces of belonging, to create these spaces where everyone can be who they can be. So what do we mean by justice? Justice really is a place where everybody may function in the various aspects of their lives according to their particular capacity. So here we are going to look at what the final product looked like. This is the grid that she made of everybody's artwork. And I thought it was really beautiful because it showed the artwork of many different people, and we just can't tell who did what or what their capacities were, right? So this is what we want in our world. This is what we want in our classrooms. This is what we want in our homes. A way to include and to explore how our caring we can be creative and create these spaces of belonging. By the way, the term empathy as innovation is borrowed from Satya Nadella, who is the CEO of Microsoft. And he has talked very beautifully about empathy and how empathy has allowed him to be very creative with Microsoft, because he had a son with special needs. And he was able to listen and intuit the unarticulated needs of his son. So when we live and work with people who have special needs, many of them are non-verbal. Many of them will only be able to raise an eyebrow or be very angry or be very happy. And only by that body language we can intuit whether they want water or whether they want to eat and things like that. So I would encourage you, if you have an opportunity, spend some time with somebody who's non-verbal and look at the ways in which you can communicate with them. So I'm at the end of my presentation, and I'd like to leave you with one final quote by one of my favorite philosophers, Simone Weil. So she says, 2 prisoners whose cells adjoin communicate with each other by knocking on the wall. The wall is the thing which separates them, but it is also their means of communication. It is the same with us, others, and God. Every separation is a link, or can be a link. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.